Time now to see what's making headlines. Solange Moujon back in the studio for another look at the papers. Solange, this time beginning with the coronavirus. 25 people dead, more than 800 infected. How's the press covering this story?
Well, the China Daily tells us about the measures that Beijing is taking to, quote, seal off the city of Wuhan indefinitely, as well as cut public transport intensities, build a new hospital over the next 2 weeks to treat the infected. But the fact that 25 million people have been put in a form of lockdown in order to try and contain the virus has done little to calm the panic and fears in China and abroad. Let's take the Times, the British paper, for example. They say that panic has sort of spread. They're covering the hundreds of cases that have popped up abroad. And the paper tells us that the WHO has yet to call this an international emergency, though they have said it is an emergency in China.
And there's still a lot of discussion about how this disease even originated.
Yeah, the New Zealand Herald tells us that the pneumonia-like virus is thought to have started, for humans at least, in a market where animal life and exotic live animals are sold, specifically a seafood market that's being investigated. And this has created much discussion about a practice by some Chinese people where animals are slaughtered on the spot, some markets where animals are slaughtered on the spot. Now, we learn that this appetite for quote-unquote warm meat is risky when it comes to health practices, because it increases the risk of transmitting diseases from animals to humans. But now that we can get it, why do we care about where it has come from? Well, the Huffington Post, the French version of the Huffington Post, tackles this question. And they explain that getting to the bottom of what exact animal or animals transmitted the disease will actually help scientists figure out how best to treat it now that humans can get it.
All right, well, let's shift gears now to the impeachment trial of Donald Trump in the U.S. Senate. Democratic House prosecutors will present their last day of arguments later today. But how's the conservative press covering the second day of arguments?
Well, the conservative Washington Times, now not to be confused with the Washington Post, the Washington Times wonders, are the Democrats, quote, going to get around to presenting the new overwhelming evidence? In essence, the conservative paper says that the Republican senators have not been swayed at all by the past 2 days of arguments and that they are, quote, not going to change their minds about sticking with Donald Trump, which has led more mainstream media or less partisan press to wonder whether any of the Republican senators will break ranks and, quote, end this charade of saying Donald Trump did not commit impeachable offenses. The New Yorker magazine says that the outcome is a foregone conclusion that Republicans will vote along partisan lines, regardless of the evidence that's shown. But the Washington Post, there's the Post, says that there is a major risk there. That the paper warns Republicans to think carefully about the choice they have to make. That if this trial is perceived by the American public as being a quick, botched job where all avenues have not been explored, then at the ballot box, some of those Republican senators could suffer in November. That Trump may have his diehard fans, but not all Republican senators have that luxury. And the public will be watching, or not, there are some complaints that the hearings are a bit boring, to see if, so the public will potentially be watching to see if Republican senators are, quote, a portrait of fairness or a portrait of corruption and cowardice. That's from the Washington Post.
Now, another high-profile trial got underway, this one in New York, and instead of Harvey Weinstein. What's the press saying about that?
Well, the actress Annabella Sciorra gave the first testimony in the case. The Week tells us that it was, quote, harrowing to hear how the actress described being pinned down and raped by the Hollywood producer. Now, this is the first of multiple testimonies of women who say Weinstein assaulted or raped them. Not all of them, like Sciorra, will actually be more than witnesses because the statute of limitations for her and others have passed.
And now there's Weinstein accusations launched the Me Too movement, and we're still feeling ripple effects of that in the music industry, notably with the Grammy Awards.
Yeah, the New York Times takes us through the hiring and then the now suspension of Deborah Dugan. She was brought on to try and make the Grammys more female and minority friendly after the former head said that women need to step up, and that's why not enough women were were getting awards. Well, from her hiring, since her hiring, everything has gone downhill, according to the New York Times. She filed a complaint to HR about problems that she was seeing at the Recording Academy, namely of sexual harassment and of it being a boys' club. And from there, she was put on leave. And an assistant said she was a bully. And that's when she filed a complaint that has now led her to fight back. She filed a 44-page complaint saying the Academy was retaliating against her for uncovering misconduct and rampant conflicts of interest by the board that runs the Academy Awards. Now, this sentiment, the Billboard says, is spot on. The music award ceremony has major problems of, quote, transparency, diversity, and progressivity. So just a few ideas to look out for if you happen to watch the Grammys on Sunday night. They'll be aired.
All right. Thank you very much, Solange Moujon, with a look at what's making headlines.